Welcome back, creeps.
Hey, y'all.
How's everybody doing? That's not a thing that I say. Sorry it's been so long. I do have a little announcement at the very top of the show. Tell me how your week is going first.
My week is good. I've been doing a lot of vlogging, and I think that's pork chop.
At the door. Yeah, anyway, so what have you been up to since the last episode?
Mostly vlogging and doing a ton of reading.
You started a book club in work.
I did. I started a book club at work. Everyone's really excited about it. And when I say everyone, I mean like a good chunk of people that normally I wouldn't talk to because, my department's kind of...
Fuck those guys.
My department's kind of like an island on its own. So anyways, did the book club, doing a lot of stuff, extracurriculars at work that I enjoy because my job is very boring. But this is making going to work really fun. What else have I been doing? That's pretty much it. I got the new Peach game. I haven't played that yet. I've been pretty busy, and I got a new tattoo today.
Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we're also, well, you've been busy with the chickens.
Oh, yeah. We have chickens now.
And as
more
well...
chickens.
Yeah, more chickens. And so as well, a friend of ours fostered a dog who had a litter of puppies.
I saw that.
Yeah, and so now between her and her son, who is quite young, they're like helping to raise these puppies, and they're gorgeous. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 puppies and mom. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes for this episode because she's just trying to get help with like supplies, yeah, pee pads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure she's going through a ton of them.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, the link will be below for an Amazon wish list. And it'll be greatly appreciated by us and our good friend.
Yeah, 'cause dogs are expensive.
Dogs are expensive, and now she has 9 of them. That's insane. I know they had fostered before, but like this is a whole next level of fostering.
You want to do a tarot card of the day?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the tarot card of the day, is the Six of Cups. Today's message. Today, embrace the radiant beauty that life offers. Whether you're finding joy in simple pleasures, reminiscing about cherished memories, or extending a hand of kindness, let every moment be infused with heartfelt warmth. Just as a flower blooms with grace, let your actions and thoughts unfold with gentle beauty, touching both your soul and those around you.
Wow.
I know.
That's very loving and kind of hippie-ish. Nice.
I love that for you guys.
Yeah, I didn't do any of that stuff today, so hopefully somebody else did. Right. Oh, yeah. Also, at the top of the episode, we are going to be taking an extended break. Indefinitely.
You want to tell them why?
Because I haven't got time to do this anymore.
But why?
Because of work.
Yes.
Yeah, because of my shitty-ass job.
Basically, we're not abandoning you because we want to. We're abandoning you because Adam's job doesn't allow him the time or energy to do anything besides sleep.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's just a case of, like, obviously we've been struggling to keep consistent for, like, over a year now. Or almost a year. And I don't want to do this half-assed.
It's been a challenge for sure.
Yeah, so just with everything that happened at the start of this year, and, you know, I was really trying to get, like, more and more stuff out there, and it's just been less and less. So rather than give you guys shitty content, I'd rather give you guys no content and then hopefully come back, I don't know, maybe next year or something.
With a better job.
Yeah,
with normal hours.
Normal hours and much better pay. So if anybody's hiring out there, let me fucking know. But with that being said, we're going to wrap up the True Haunting book case scenario dealio. Ed, Becker, and his wife, Marcia. Right, so we left off last episode with Ed finally acknowledging that he and his wife, Marcia, were living in a haunted house. We learned some of the tragic and troubled history of the family that built, lived, and died in the house right up until Ed purchased it. Ed had never believed in ghosts or anything like that before now, and it had taken quite a bit of convincing to get him to even entertain the thought. Marcia had believed from the first week. In fact, the first time Ed showed her around, she said she would never step foot in the basement again, and to my knowledge, she never did. So that was the whole reason why Ed even had to like install new gas lines and stuff upstairs to put a washer and dryer on the upstairs balcony that we talked about so much in the last episode.
Yeah, because she didn't want to go downstairs.
Yeah, it wasn't just because she didn't want to have to go through the effort of going downstairs. She just got bad vibes in the basement. So, like a lot of people we encounter with stories like this, they were feeling divided amongst each other, between themselves, and also trapped in their new house. They couldn't just up and leave because they had nowhere to go and all of their money had gone into securing the house. They couldn't sell at this point because the realtor fees alone would have put them in negative equity, so they were stuck. Marcia felt that whatever was in their house was merely testing the waters with all these minor inconveniences, while Ed felt that it was probably something more residual. This was his house and he wasn't going to be scared of old Ben the pervert. He literally said stuff like that out loud while talking with Marcia. And it wasn't the first time either. Like, we also learned, I think, towards the end of last week that Ed had persistently been complaining to Ben the old pervert even before he thought it might have been something paranormal. And in doing so, maybe he was like empowering this, whatever it was. Either way, Marcia didn't like it. And this wasn't the height of Ed's provocations either. He was actively antagonizing Ben and trying to counteract his nuisances. One evening, he even invited his good friend George over just to prove that not only did they have ghosts, but that Ed could outsmart them. George didn't believe in any of this tomfoolery, and I think he was so shocked that his friends had gone off the deep end that he accepted the invite and, together with his wife, visited Ed and Marcia the next night.
Safety in numbers.
Well, and George was blind, so he couldn't drive over there himself.
Is that? I forgot that he was blind. Yeah. That's true.
So I actually might have gotten that wrong as well last week. I think I might have said that he never showed up again, but he did a couple of times. So one of the regular paranormal annoyances that they had been experiencing for quite a while at this point was the door in the kitchen opening of its own accord. Initially, I think it was just a case of them like finding the door ajar after they were sure that they had closed it previously. And I think it was also another point between the two of them kind of being like, you know, Ed would walk in and be like, damn it, Marcia, like I closed this door, and vice versa. So just like all of these small things that add up to make like a big fight, basically. Like that, and then the telephone being off the cradle was the other kind of consistent thing.
Oh, right, because they charge.
Well, no, they don't if you're not actually talking to someone.
Oh, it was just tying up the line.
Yeah, and every time Ed would call, he thought Marcia was on the phone.
Oh, that's right.
Racking up the bill, yeah. But now, though, the kitchen door had actually begun opening itself right in front of them. Like door handle and shaking and all.
Yeah.
Door handle and shaking and all. Door handle shaking and all, as if someone was on the other side.
That sounds like the name of a song.
Yeah. So yeah, like they'd be sitting in the kitchen, Ed and Marcia, like having a chat, and it'd be around the same time, I think, almost every night, and the door would just like start rattling and shaking in its frame and then open up. So while the two couples were sat at the kitchen table catching up, Ed explained everything to George, who thought that they were crazy. And then Ed eventually grew impatient and started calling out to old Ben, shouting at him, saying like, come on and open up the door, calling him a pervert and a deviant and whatnot. Marcia again was very uncomfortable with this, but sure enough, the doorknob starts to tremble and shake and the door starts to open. It only opens an inch or so before it's stopped by the string that Ed has tied around it to stop it from opening completely. This was Ed outsmarting the ghost. But it bounces against the string and rattles and vibrates against it as though somebody is like literally trying to force the door open and getting more and more frustrated before they finally just give up. And I think they said this went on for like 2 whole minutes. Like, which is a long time to be sat there looking at a doorknob.
Mm-hmm.
George's wife had been describing what she was witnessing this whole time because obviously George is blind. He reacts almost in anger, telling them it's all bullshit, trying to come up with some sort of irrational, rational explanation. As he's mouthing off, a spindle which had been firmly attached to a cabinet behind him and about 8 foot off the floor was ripped away from where it had been, floated about 6 feet through the air, seemed to pause above the middle of the table, and was then slammed down onto the table. The interesting thing is, aside from the floating piece of wood,
Right.
obviously, and as well, this piece of wood was presumably fixed to the ceiling and to the cabinet. I think it was doing a double act of keeping the cabinet from falling over, as well as Ed had decorative plants behind it and stuff. So it gets ripped out of the ceiling, floats across, but when it lands on the table, it doesn't bounce. It's as if someone has their hand behind it and slams it down purposefully,
Mm-hmm.
George still refused to believe in ghosts, but him and his wife left very quickly after this event, and I think they only returned one more time.
I think that's very strange that George is very ghosts aren't real.
When he's literally witnessing it,
Well, no, because a lot the thing and I'm not being facetious, but the main argument is people say ghosts aren't real because they can't see them, and he's blind.
I don't understand what that has to do with anything.
Because if he's following that logic, assuming that he is, wouldn't it stand to reason that he'd believe in nothing because he's blind and he can't see anything?
But I mean, he lost his sight in Vietnam. It's not like he.
Oh, I thought he was born blind.
No, he was in Viet fucking Nam, man.
Oh.
But either way, I think blind people still believe in cream cheese and stuff.
No, I know, but that's I feel like they'd be
more open.
More open because I don't know.
Maybe. I mean,
maybe it's just me being ignorant, but
this is also 50 years ago in the 70s.
Yeah.
When men were men and shit like that. So I don't know, maybe he thought if he believed in ghosts he'd be gay. Who fucking knows? Man went to Vietnam, so I'm sure he's got a lot more going on in here than Now, Ed had gotten in the habit of going home for lunch during the work week. I think in part because he knew he wouldn't be able to get through to Marcia on the phone, thanks to the ghosts. And sometimes while walking up to the house, he would see this polite old lady having a sit on his steps. She would smile when he said hello, but that was all. Anytime he tried to show Marcia, she would be gone and he couldn't figure out where she might have lived or which building she was walking from. He knew who owned the next building over. There was an abandoned store to next here, and basically an old lady couldn't have moved that fast. Marcia never saw her until early one morning as she kissed Ed goodbye on the stairs. The old lady was stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking right up at them. Not smiling this time, though. She was looking very sad and very serious. She turned and, quote, glided towards the first floor apartment entrance. Ed recognized her immediately as being the old lady who sits on the steps and thought she must have been staying with their new tenants, Dave and Ellen. So as far as Ed was concerned, that was the only explanation, and off he went to work. Tra-la-la-la-la. And later that day, when Marcia bumped into Ellen, she assured her that there was in fact no old lady staying with them. It was also 4:30 or 5 in the morning when Ed was going to work.
Yeah.
The following week, Marcia decided that she wanted to go stay with her parents for a few days to try and escape this whole ghost business. So she took the baby and left Ed alone with the cat, the dog, and their ghosts. Dave, the downstairs tenant, stopped Ed as he was coming in from dropping Marcia to the airport, complaining that the electricity had been switching itself on and off again. So Ed told him that he'd arrange for an electrician to call out. I'm pretty sure every time the electricity was shut off, it was it would only happen when Dave was sitting down listening to records. So he thought that it was Ed being you're being too noisy, but this is him being passive aggressive. But then I think he lowered the volume all the way down, so only he could hear it, and still it would switch off. So now that I say that out loud, as an electrician, maybe there was just a problem with his record player, but it shouldn't have tripped the
whole
whole
house.
like first floor, yeah.
Oh.
So I don't know. I'm on the fence now about the record player. Over the next couple of days, Ed spoke with Dave and Ellen separately. And Dave told him that they weren't surprised when Marcia took a trip home because they had heard them arguing almost nightly. They were hearing the same argument as Ed and Marcia, but Ed didn't say anything because Dave also told him that he was part Native American and extremely superstitious. In fact, Dave told Ed that wearing black stones was bad luck. Now, I thought this was interesting because I constantly have on 2 black stone rings and a black keychain or necklace.
Yeah, you
black
do.
stone. But I was under the impression that protected you. That's from what I read somewhere, probably on Ghost Adventures years ago. You know what I mean? Anyway, when Ed spoke with Ellen, though, she candidly told him that they had been experiencing ghostly goings on since their first week. Footsteps on the back porch, dishes crashing to the floor, their chandelier swayed almost constantly, and the locked basement door would open of its own accord. Now, she hadn't said anything to Dave either at this point, because she knew if she even mentioned like a thought of it, he'd be gone. It's also worth pointing out that Dave doesn't look like anybody who would be part Native American or anything like that. He's like a tiny little white man. So when I saw him in the Paranormal Witness episode, I was like, this isn't the Native, you know what I mean? But through interviews with Ed Becker, he was like, now I could have sworn maybe he was Italian or something, you know? But yeah, he's like a pint-sized tenant. Yeah, also when I watched the Paranormal Witness episode, I think that they might have blended Marcia and Ellen's experiences together. And also another witness. They kind of just melded them all. Because for whatever reason, I don't think Dave and Ellen are together anymore. Maybe she passed away. I don't know. But only Dave was on the show. So we didn't have her side of the story, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But Ed did say in an interview that the producers embellished quite a bit of that episode, like of the story. And there was kind of like one B-roll story that showed Ellen's basement door opening while her and Marcia sat at the kitchen table, like just chatting to each other. And the baby in its walker was dragged towards the top of the stairs, like only to be caught in the nick of time. So I'm not actually sure if like all of that happened, you know? So just in case you watch the Paranormal Witness episode and are like, oh, they didn't include this or that, it's because I found information to back certain stuff up, you know what I mean? While Marcia was gone, she was back home visiting, something did start to steal Ed's keys and bend the new garage lock key, which he couldn't understand. He even hid his keys under his pillow at night, only to find them missing in the morning. Now, I thought that was like too fucking far, man. You know what I mean? And anyway, after a few days without Marcia, he decided, fuck it. And he just drove out to meet her for the last few days of the trip. I think he lasted 3 or 4 days. And like in those 3 or 4 days, he had to get the key fixed. Then the key like actually snapped. So he had to get a new lock, all this kind of crap. And then there was also an instance where he like left a can of soup on the stove. And when he came back, it was like burning, but he had never turned it on. But I was like, well, that could have just been because you weren't paying, like you were tired or whatever. Whereas he tried to say like, no, they were trying to burn the house down. So he had Dave and Ellen take care of Holly in their apartment and just pop upstairs to feed Kitty, the cat.
Oh, yeah.
Much like when poor Elmira moved out, though, it all seemed to like kick off as soon as the apartment was empty. Dave and Ellen had heard screaming and shouting coming from the upstairs apartment, footsteps every night, and even furniture being thrown around. They almost called the police on a couple of occasions, but I think they both knew what was going on and neither one wanted to admit it to the other. And then finally they were like, oh, fuck it, like, we know what this is.
Yeah.
And then when Ed and Marcia returned, they handed in their 90-day notice as per their contract.
That sucks.
Yeah. The only thing Ed and Marcia found out of place upon entering was a big heavy chair which had been planted right in the middle of the living room. The one good thing to come out of all of this was that Ellen and Marcia could now hang out together because Ed figured, well, if they're going to be moving out anyway, you know, we can all just hang out. It'll be fine. And Ellen even told Marcia that she had seen a man with a distorted face in her baby's bedroom when they had first moved in, which prompted her to move her child to a different bedroom. There's 3 bedrooms, the front one, the middle one, and the back one. She had the baby in the front one. And she seemed to have gotten a good look at this chap, but he was gone in the second or two that it took her to run, like from the kitchen or the living room into the bedroom. Ed's neighbor confirmed that her description matched that of Henry Sykes, the son who had died under suspicious circumstances in that very bedroom. And like as well, Ed didn't approach this neighbor being like, you know, we think we saw a ghost. He was just like, hey, like, what did this guy actually look like?
Yeah.
Any chance so? And he would confirm. Next came the animal issues. One evening, after returning home from visiting Ed's sick aunt, they couldn't find Kitty anywhere. Eventually, they realized that one of the windows had been opened, that they were on the second floor apartment. And when Ed cautiously poked his head out, there was poor Kitty lying motionless on the ground.
Aww.
He ran down to grab her before Marcia could see, but when he picked her up, she was absolutely fine.
That's weird.
Yeah, as if she had been gently lowered from the second story window.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, but like, what is this, a threat? Like, you know what I mean?
Like I could just let you fall even faster.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, well, so what's a cat gonna be like? Okay.
No, I think the ghost was saying, like, I could kill your fucking cat if I
Oh.
wanted to. I don't think he was worried about the cat.
Yeah, I was like, what are you talking about?
And as well, Kitty was a bit like our pork chop, like not really built for regular captivities.
She was large.
A larger girl, yeah. So really, if she had a fallen out, like, there wouldn't have been much hope for her.
Yeah.
Only a few days later, Ed got up to take Holly out to do her business in the back garden. The evening previous, Holly and Kitty had both gone mad at an invisible something in Ed and Marcia's room, which was pretty much the norm at this stage. Like, Ed and Marcia would settle down for the night, turn off the lights and be drifting off to sleep when suddenly the cat and dog would start hissing and growling and barking at something that would seem to stand in the doorway to their bedroom, which they would have to keep open in order to hear if the kids started crying or anything. So the next morning, when Ed let Holly, the dog, out, she just bolted. She jumped the back fence and was gone, and they never saw her again.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Oh, you get it?
And apparently the same thing happened to Dave when, like, the downstairs neighbor, when they let their dog out one day, he just decided he had had enough, jumped the back fence and was gone. And then Ed got a new dog, a poodle, to keep Marcia company, and this dog did the exact same thing. I think only 3 days after they had it.
Well, they don't have a deposit to lose.
Oh,
if they move out, yeah.
Yeah, they don't give a fuck. It had been about 10 months since Ed and Marcia had moved in. So one thing I will say about this case is that it seemed to have moved a little bit faster than a lot of the other ones that we've covered, right? Because like a lot of the time it takes place over like 5 or 6 years, and whatever. Yeah. Or the family's been living there for a long time and then like boom,
something
like
happens.
Whatever.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they hadn't been trying to stop this stuff from happening either.
Mm-hmm.
Ed had basically been kicked out of the local church because the priest was such a chicken shit that he straight out just refused to come and help after running out. Remember that day, when the thing exploded? Listen to the last episode. The day of the christening, or as I have here, hot dog buffet lunch day.
He didn't even take his hot dogs to go.
Didn't even take his hot dogs to go, just the money. But yeah, the priest actually became like quite belligerent with Ed. He was like, your house does not need to be blessed. I'm not going back there. And then even future tenants who went to that same priest, when they told him the address, his demeanor just changed.
Weird.
He was like, nope, that house is fine. I'm not going near it.
So weird.
Yeah. Bit of a prick, to be honest.
Yeah, weird prick.
Yeah. But like, where do you turn after that? You know what I mean? This is the early 70s. It's not like you could just Google it. So Marcia got to searching the Yellow Pages, of all things. For those of you who don't know, the Yellow Pages was a big giant book that got delivered, every year or every 6 months?
I think so.
And it just had all of the numbers in there.
Business numbers, I think.
Yeah, businesses.
Or
yeah.
in the white pages or residents.
Yeah, and I think it was the same in Ireland. So that's how you would find stuff. Like, And that's what Marsha did. I assume she looked under P for psychic or something.
Or
And
G for ghost.
well, that's where I probably would have started and then be like, oh, this isn't going to work. So anyway, she came up with 2 phone numbers. The first crowd were a complete bust. It was kind of like if we went out to a house. You know what I mean? But really, we just wanted to see ghosts. We didn't have any answers. But the second group seemed a lot more competent. They had various interviews with Ed and Marsha to ensure that they were serious, not just trying to pull some sort of prank. And then after that, they sent out a couple of psychics. Now, one of these psychics seemed to be pretty on the nose with what she was picking up on. And the other seemed like a bit of a con man, to be honest. Unfortunately, it's the latter that followed up with the family, but we'll get to him in a second. Again, I don't know why. I think like con men, he was the one who was like in their face and like, this is what I'm gonna do and blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? So naturally they went with him, whereas the woman who was with him was like a genuinely gifted psychic medium. But she was probably just a bit more humble about it, you know?
Maybe.
So anyway, Barbara was the name of this lady. And she was the one who seemed to know what was going on. As they walked through the house, Ed was not exactly being like overly warm to these people. After the first group of clowns they had worked with, he was being like very overly cautious and skeptical and just not giving them like, not even not giving them information. Like he wouldn't even smile at them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Barbara turned around at one point, looked Ed directly in the eyes and just said, bullets. This was really all it took to gain Ed's confidence at this point, but he still pressed her for more. He knew what she was referring to, but he needed to hear her say it. There are bullets in the basement, she told him. The shitty psychic was just nodding and smiling as though like he was privy to what was happening. But in all reality, only Ed and Barbara knew. Like Marsha didn't even know what she was talking about. But when Ed had been clearing out the basement all those months back, he, like, there was all sorts of junk and crap. And I don't know why he kept this in particular, but he found a jar of bullets, like a mason jar, just full of random bullets. And for whatever reason, he placed them up on top of one of the rafters in the basement ceiling and then just kind of forgot all about it. Like, I'd say it was just, he had already thrown out the garbage, picked this up and was like, oh, fuck it, put it up here, forgot all about it. Until this very moment. Where in the basement? He asked Barbara. In a jar in the rafters. There are bullets in a jar sitting on a ceiling rafter in the basement.
Nice.
Now, to me, this would have sealed the deal.
Yeah.
I might not have let her leave, to be honest, until we had like this whole situation figured out. But one more extremely interesting thing she said came after they did a walk around the whole building. They identified the members of the Sykes family, all of the ones who had passed away there anyway, including the dad, actually. That was confirmed. I was unsure of that last week, or last episode, but the dad did die on the property as well. And Ed was able to confirm all of these people thanks to what he had learned from his neighbor, Walter. Barbara told him that they had multiple ghosts, but that one was in the garage. Now, I don't know that Ed spent all that much time in the garage or if there was even anything in there when he did move in, other than to park his car and stuff like that. But this came as a surprise to himself and Marsha. Barbara went on to say that this person in the garage was a woman who had hung herself. Yeah, but Ed corrected her saying, oh no, that poor lady hung herself in the basement. And Barbara insisted it had happened in the garage, telling him if they removed the body from the basement, it had been moved there. It must have been moved there, for she died in the garage. And then that made Ed think about the new garage key that kept getting bent.
Yeah.
So it's one of those really ambiguous things. It's like, maybe he's just drawing two random connections. Maybe she got this wrong. Or maybe there's something even weirder going on because they already thought like the death of the other son was like suspicious and all.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're never going to know unless we find Barbara. But I think she might be long gone. So again, I don't know why they didn't have Barbara take the lead here and honestly just try and sort it out. Maybe she didn't feel like she could. I think it might have just been a case of toxic masculinity. this is just me speculating, but the other two people with Barbara were Tom Valentine, an accredited investigative journalist and author, and Joseph DeLuise, a hairdresser who gave in to his clairvoyant powers in his 40s. And he went on to be described by some, very few, as Chicago's own Nostradamus. Now,
All right.
I'm not trying to discredit this man. He's dead. You know, I'm not speaking ill of him or whatever. But based off the book, I feel like he just kind of nodded along with whatever Barbara was saying. And then Ed got a little bit starstruck because Tom gave him a copy of their new book, Psychic Mission, in which Tom wrote about Joseph's life. So I think that Barbara did the real work and then Joseph was just a bit of a con man. Like I said, talking a big game, you know?
Yeah.
His big claims to fame were supposedly predicting the collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is famous for the Mothman.
Oh, this is that guy.
Predicted. No, you're
The
thinking
US.
Gray Barker.
Oh,
yeah, sorry, yeah. I reached out, yeah. So West Virginia, which might sound familiar to you all because this was the bridge which collapsed amongst all the weirdness of the Mothman sightings and Woody Derenberger's encounters with the Lanulosians and whatnot. But Joseph also claimed to have identified Tex Watson as the person who murdered Sharon Tate in the infamous Tate LaBianca murders carried out by members of Charles Manson's gang. He claimed to have done psychic readings for Marilyn Monroe and even claimed to have predicted that Edward Ted Kennedy would be involved in the drowning of a young blonde woman 6 months before it happened. Now, this was very true. John F. Kennedy's brother, Ted, was involved in an extremely suspicious incident in which a young woman who was super involved in politics and wrote speeches for the Kennedys and all, died, tragically. Her name was Mary Jo Kopechne?
Kopechne, maybe?
Kopechne, I'm not sure. Anyway, it's a whole different story, but Ted Kennedy was directly responsible for her death. He fled the scene of the crime, left her to drown in freezing cold waters after suspiciously taking her from a party.
I think I heard about this.
Yeah, like it's a very true thing that the Kennedys were just like, oh, you know, boys will be boys.
Yeah.
Women are always finding themselves upside down in frigid cold fucking waters in New England in like March. Anyway, he was very responsible for her death and never served any time for it. Besides the point. Joseph DeLuise, this psychic con man, I reached out to an extremely well-read paranormal researcher who shall remain nameless, although I'm sure most of you know him. And he said that, quote, DeLuise was a notorious bullshitter. He would always claim he'd, quote, predicted events when writing about them after the event. And then, on a very personal note, I found this guy's obituary. Well, his find a grave, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he had a very loving, I guess like obituary or like memorial thing put up there by his girlfriend or like foster daughter. I don't know. She called him daddy.
Okay.
In a very creepy way. And she basically said like, you know, he was everything and all this. And then there was another comment underneath it from his actual daughter saying like, this man was a terrible human being. He never did anything for his children, called this woman like a gold digger.
Dang.
And all that. And she was like, so your daddy was really just a sugar daddy and all this. And apparently this other woman like bled him fucking dry of resources. So look, again, this has nothing to do with him being...
Spill that tea.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with him being like a good or bad psychic. I don't think he was either. But anyway, here's a small selection of his incorrect predictions thanks to Paul Best. I love the ghost story, guys. By 1979, he said that marijuana will be legalized in the US across the board. Problems concerning energy and hunger will disappear, but unemployment will continue to plague us. People will travel in electric cars through prefabricated underground highways. Anti-submarine weapons using sound in a destructive capacity will be installed in undersea emplacements. Japan will undergo a revolution, then merge with China.
Highly unlikely.
This was all supposed to have happened before 1979. So it didn't happen.
Like, I'm looking at these, like, could these possibly still happen? You know?
This next one, maybe, but still like 50 years after he predicted. England will cease to be a monarchy after the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. And I mean, what they're going through right now, yeah, shit, maybe. And then he also said that the US wouldn't have an election in 2004. Weird. Then apparently he only started talking about the Silver Bridge collapse the week after it happened. All this kind of crap. So anyway, I think Ed was just overwhelmed by Joseph's ego and the fact that he had that book about him, which at that time, like, you couldn't just self-publish books to Amazon like Ed did. Now, Ed's book was very successful, like, you know what I mean? But I could go on there right now, upload a fucking PDF or a Word document, and they'll print it for me.
Nice.
Yeah, and anybody can buy it. And I'm sure I will eventually.
Same.
Yeah, fuck it, why not? But anyway, back in the 70s, this was like a huge deal. So this guy was like, oh my God, you got your words on this paper.
Yeah.
Also, there's like, I could just start telling people that I predicted shit though.
Yeah.
Like, I predicted 9/11. Prove me wrong. You know what I mean? You weren't there.
Yeah.
I told my third class.
A friend who's now dead, so.
Yeah, you know what I mean? You never know. Anyway, Deloise came back a few days later when the house was empty to walk around with someone who claimed to be a British minister who his sole responsibility was to go around exorcising castles of demons. Deloise told Ed and Marcia that they were going to come back and perform an exorcism, but in the meantime, the best thing to do is just not acknowledge any of the activity. Don't show signs of frustration, anger, or fear, basically. Which is, I mean, that's a fairly solid rule anyway, right? Because like a lot of the time the stuff is just trying to get a reaction.
I think it depends.
Yeah.
On the situation.
Yeah, like as
From
long
what
as
I've
it's not
seen.
dangerous. Like,
Yeah.
Immediately after this visit, the activity ramped up, but Ed and Marcia did their best to ignore it. And I don't think anything changed. I think it was all the same activity, just more so. Like, you know what I mean? And then the night before the exorcism, everything went silent, which again, we've actually seen happen like
That's
over
true.
and over again.
Yeah. It's like, no one's home.
Yeah. We're not haunted.
There are no ghosts here.
Here's where our story takes an even more bizarre turn, though.
Do you have any ghost milk?
No, anyway. NBC, the television network, who own Peacock and like The Office and stuff.
Yeah.
They caught wind of what was going on and wanted to be on site to film this exorcism.
Really?
This exorcism would be the very first TV broadcasted
paranormal exorcism.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's on YouTube.
Cool.
And I'm going to include it here somewhere. Now, to be fair, the Exorcist book had only just been released in 1971 when this was taking place. The movie wouldn't be made until 1973. So there wasn't necessarily like the hype around this kind of event at this time. I think the book was in the charts, but even still.
Okay.
This would, like I said, this would actually become the first televised exorcism in history. It's unclear, as far as I know, how the network found out, but apparently neither Deloise or the British Demon Castle chap had informed them about it or anything like that. I will play the clip here so you got all, so everybody can hear it.
The supernatural, and most people treat the subject lightly. Most people are skeptics, and they're not interested or concerned in the mysterious things which sometimes occur around them. However, today we have the story of one family which says it was forced into becoming concerned.
This modest two-story house is situated on a quiet street on Chicago's northwest side. To everybody else on the block, the house is like any other. But to the people who live here, it's haunted. Ed and Marcia Becker bought their home a year ago. And shortly after they moved in with their baby, they claim unusual occurrences began.
Strange little things were happening. The telephone was coming off the hook. Cabinet doors were closing. Doors were opening. Doors were closing. Just strange things.
One thing that really bothered me was if things were to fly, like my mixer flew off the wall, landed right at my feet, and it didn't fall, it actually flew.
It bent my house keys, my garage key, the same key twice. I have a different lock for every lock in the house. And I actually bent it and moved it one time to sit on top of the refrigerator, one
Good
time to
side
sit
of
in
the
the
keys.
kitchen sink. And this was at a time when my wife was on vacation, so there was nobody in the house but myself.
The Beckers said they had to install a modern trip lever in their bathtub because the plug would mysteriously wrap itself around the faucet when they weren't looking. This past week, they said they were awakened by the sound of a woman crying. It came from the dining room, but there was no one in the house but themselves.
I hated to think of what it was. I kind of put it out of my mind. And I tried to find a logical explanation for everything that happened. But we couldn't.
Mrs. Becker had heard about people who supposedly are able to rid houses of ghosts or spirits. So she contacted them and convinced them to come to the house and see if anything could be done. William Darrell Davis and Joseph DeLuise, ministers of the Independent Spiritualist Church in Chicago, agreed to perform without fee an exorcism. That is a ceremony designed to rid something of evil spirits. An NBC News crew was permitted to film the ritual. We were confined with the residents of the house to the living room. Each of us was requested to wear a cross for protection during the exorcism, which was conducted in the dining room. An altar was fashioned, on which were placed candles, a Bible, a crucifix, bread, and wine. At first there were prayers to God, and then the ministers gave each other communion. Reverend DeLuise is a medium, and during the ritual he went into a trance. He described it as a total relaxation of his mind and body, which he says allows him to communicate with spirits. Once he assumed this mental state, we, the spectators, felt a strong gust of wind from an open window that blew the curtains and rattled the Venetian blinds. Shortly thereafter, Reverend DeLuise began talking. He claims the spirit used his vocal cords.
Remember, the combination.
Why did it concern you? Did you realize
I
this?
can't figure it out.
Why
Even
you
though I can understand it,
Is it important to you?
it's important to me.
Why did you stay here?
I've got to get the number.
In Reverend DeLuise's hand was a cross in a mirror which he waved through the air. This was supposedly to show the troubled spirit that it had no reflection and therefore did not exist. Then he apparently came out of his trance and told Reverend Davis to offer the so-called spirit the bread and wine of communion. Then Reverend Davis issued what he called the warning.
In so much as this house has been purified, let there be a warning. Or if the house is clean, and it is not replaced with that of soul and with love, then beware the danger 7 times the 4 which have left shall return. For this moment there is love. This moment there is release, and that which bothers the individual will come from within himself, and not from that which was here.
Following the ritual, the ministers went through every room in the house, as well as the roof and garage, spreading blessed salt. They said this would seal the house symbolically, keeping the spirit from returning. Reverend DeLuise said the spirit was an old woman who may have been gypped out of some money. DeLuise said she was worried about a number, possibly to a safety deposit box. The Beckers found the explanation plausible since they found out an old woman had died in the house before they bought it. It's been several days since the exorcism, and the Beckers report the house has been quiet. The phone remains on the receiver. The cabinet doors are still. The mixer stays securely on the wall. And there have been no mysterious footsteps in the back of the house. The exorcists say the ghost is gone. The Beckers hope they're right. Carol Simpson, NBC News.
Yeah. So
I always find red text against a black screen
it's the worst.
jarring.
And actually, like I'll if I remember, I'll share that YouTube channel because I think Ed Becker was trying to make his own like Becker TV,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like got some really strange edits and stuff to it. But yeah, so NBC also owned Paranormal Witness, or the rights to Paranormal Witness. So when they picked up the story, they were able to access their records, their archives, and then they gave that video footage to Ed. But obviously, if you're watching this, like it's not in the best condition. A couple of interesting things though, even just about this news clip, like Ed reckons that there's an apparition peering out of the doorway at one point. I'm not too sure about that, but I will repost it.
There was some movement.
Definitely was. I watched it frame by frame, but I'm still unsure. Multiple times I watched it frame by frame. It could just be like the blown out highlights or even like where the tape is distorted.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still interesting nonetheless. And I'll show it to you now again. And now that I look at it in frame, it's like none of the rest of it is distorted. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It definitely like seems to
Mm-hmm.
like flow in or whatever.
Strange.
I don't know. It looks like it's stereotypical like woman in white kind of thing.
I just saw a face. That's all.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw like the bottom of it kind of flows out as if like a dress was being blown in a breeze or whatever. Anyway.
I'm laughing because I remember when you said frame by frame, me and Isaac were on TikTok because we heard that there was a video where someone caught an alien in California in someone's backyard. And the comments were like, it's here or it's here. And me and Isaac, my nephew who's 11, we were going frame by frame trying to figure out where this alien was. And we watched this so many times, but we decided to stop watching it because we started getting scared. And we were like, let's watch something funny.
Yes.
Good memories.
I remember that.
We were so scared.
But did you hear all that noise like when the priests were talking?
Yeah.
So you can hear it. That was birds. And according to Ed, like hundreds of these birds just completely surrounded the place as the thing was beginning.
Wild.
Like up until this point, they hadn't heard anything other than regular outside noise.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like one bird started, then another, and then like out of nowhere, there was just hundreds of these birds. Just as the ritual was beginning, which is strange. And then also the news reporter, Carol Simpson, who was like, went on to become very successful. Like this wasn't like her being made the joke of her channel or anything like that. She was very successful after this. She mentions that they all felt a strong gust of wind from an open window, but there was no open window. I think she might have just said that just to make it seem like they were being rational or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had completely closed all of the windows for the sound guy. And that was the sound guy, the black dude who was like sitting on the ground looking like he didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
It's because he didn't want to fucking be there. Everybody else who had showed up left. So there was only a handful of the crew stayed, and they were warned, like, if you stay, you're not allowed to leave until this is done.
Yeah.
So that dude was literally sitting on a Holy Bible and wearing a crucifix. So, oh yeah, and then the other thing, like the other priest, not Joseph DeLuise, like he's reading that Bible like he's never seen a Bible in his life before. You know what I mean? He's like, the Spirit says, don't do, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, the Beckers were hoping that these guys were right about the ghost being gone, but the peace didn't last long at all. In the follow-up call that they had with Carol Simpson, the news reporter, they told her everything was fine, but they were actually lying. They were just like, well, what the fuck is she gonna do?
Phonies.
Yeah.
Big fat phony.
Big fat phony. But they were just thinking like, well, what is she gonna do with our problem anyway?
Yeah.
And so yeah, they were just like, nah, fuck it. And then apparently, according to Ed, Joseph DeLuise and the other guy called separately kind of sheepishly, like knowing that the thing hadn't worked.
Really?
Yeah. But again, I think they just told NBC. Like, my theory, honestly, is that Joseph DeLuise called NBC. We're like, we're going to perform the sickest exorcism you were ever going to... Like,
That makes sense, yeah.
Just because he just had a book out and stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, in fact, the morning after the ritual had taken place, Ed and Marcia awoke to the sounds of a woman crying and sobbing as though she was suffering some unimaginable despair. The interesting thing was, though, Ed actually had his tape recorder set up beside the bed because he had recorded the entire exorcism and re-listened in bed with Marcia, which is spooky as fuck.
Yeah, like, why would you do that?
And apparently caught like some solid EVPs, which they didn't know were a thing. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just as they were listening back,
but why would you do that in bed right before you're going to go to sleep?
In the house that you know is fucking haunted.
Christ.
So anyway, he had the tape recorder beside him, but it was like, this was the 70s. It had to be plugged in and all that kind of stuff. So it was ready to go. He grabbed it when he heard this crying that awakened them and snuck up to the door. And as soon as he hit record,
it stopped.
Like mid-sob, just like our fucking high-heeled visitor when it stopped mid-click.
Yeah.
Which again just reinforces everything that like all of these stories add up to, you know what I mean? It's not something like it doesn't want to be recorded.
Yeah. It's for your ears only.
Yeah. And for that specific time, like
to scare you.
Yeah. And they heard it coming from in their living room, which is like their bedroom door opened into their living room.
Yeah.
So I think he said it was like 12, 15 feet away at most. Here's where the next kind of sketchy thing is, though. Ed actually mentioned the woman crying in the news report, but in the book he explicitly said that they had only ever heard it that one time, which was after all the news stuff. So who really knows?
Okay.
You know, this was like one of the very few inconsistencies that I picked up on.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the only one. Like the comments on that YouTube video were like,
hey,
yeah, like what's going on here? Something that really annoyed me about the ritual as well.
Let's hear it.
I'm reviewing rituals now. Was that according to Ed, the English dude, the big fat phony, who actually didn't sound English, now that I think of it.
Was he supposed to be English?
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That's what he
British
said his job. Yeah, his job
yeah.
was to go around expelling demons from old castles, which is like, according to Americans, is like a very feasible job to have if you live in England.
Yeah.
Because there's so many castles and demons to inhabit them. Anyway, the English dude kept saying, "This house is clean. This house is pure. Anything that bothers the individual in this house comes from the individual himself."
Bold statement.
Yeah. Basically saying, like, if we didn't do what we said we were going to do, it's not our fault, but, like, whoever lives here, it's actually your fault.
Yeah. We're scot-free.
Yeah. Passing the blame, basically. And this really fucked with Ed and Marcia as well, because it sounds like these guys were charlatans anyway, who really didn't have a clue. But then Ed and Marcia were both, like, racked with guilt for being the reason why their house is like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's, again, like, this is just, if a psychic or something, or somebody like that says some shit like that to you, I think it's safe enough to assume they're full of shit. Now, I'm not saying that you can't bring negative stuff around, but the fact that they were like helping for free of charge, but oh, look at all this publicity that we accidentally got, like,
yeah,
you know.
I mean, I would say, yeah, like, but I mean, poltergeists, they stem from the people in the house.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially, yeah. So,
or just like the right amount of whatever it takes, yeah.
So, I mean, in this situation, it was a fucked up thing to say.
Yeah. But like, even in a poltergeist situation, I'm not going to blame the person experiencing
Yeah,
it,
you're
like,
just, yeah, you have to, I would assume if something like that were possible, you'd have to tread a very careful line so that the person doesn't feel any sort of guilt.
Definitely.
Because you certainly don't want to, like, blame the victims here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe it was just their frustration at the failure of the ritual, or maybe the entities felt that they needed to double down on the activity. But things seemed to just ramp up immediately following the attempted exorcism, And Dave and Ellen told Ed that they had to leave even before their 90-day notice was up.
Mm.
Now, Ed was very reasonable about this. He still gave them the deposit back and all
He's
that.
like, I get it, ghosts.
Yeah, he's like, I can't,
We got
force you to
ghosts.
stay here. Yeah. He didn't expect anyone to put up with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
He let them move out without any hassle. Ed's sister, April, had already shown an interest in wanting to move in previously.
After all this,
Yeah,
still.
because of all this.
Oh.
So even though he didn't want to take any money from her, she told him that, she was just going to have to pay someone else anyway. So he reluctantly let her move in with her husband and 2 young boys. I think they were aged 2 and 5 or 3 and 5.
Ballsy.
Yeah. Now, April was maybe a little bit too excited about the fact that there was supposed to be ghosts in the house. And her husband, Jim, didn't give a fuck about anything. Like, at all, ever.
You sure her name wasn't Adam?
Shut up. Yeah, fair enough. I think I'd be too afraid, honestly. In theory, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I think I'd be too spooked out too easily. Like my hair tickled me the other day and scared the shit out of me.
You were like, ghost,
Yeah,
ghost,
I was
ghost.
like, So I tried to be rational, but when I'm faced with potential paranormal activity. You were there. I kicked that door.
Yeah.
Thinking it was a child. Anyway, her husband, Jim, really just didn't seem to give a fuck about anything at all, ever. Other than the fact that Ed's apartment was like way closer to his job than previously. So he was like, yeah, fuck it. I can like get to work in 10 minutes. This is great. So while Ed cleaned the downstairs apartment in anticipation of his sister's family moving in, he saw the old lady one last time. Now, this is actually really sad. As he scrubbed the floor which led to the dining room, he looked up and saw her. She had fully materialized, sitting in a wheelchair at the living room window. Ed said that she looked just as real as you or I, only it was like she was a little bit out of focus somehow. She was looking directly at Ed, then slowly turned her head to look out the window. Again, she looked directly at Ed, then back out the window, and just blinked out of existence. Ed was in shock, but I don't think he was scared. Like, I think he was just like, what did I just witness? You know what I mean? He got up slowly and made his way to the window to see what she was looking at. There, on the street, stood an older man who appeared to be a little bit down on his luck, wearing an old coat and a sad expression on his face. It was the last Sykes boy. The only child who had managed to get out of that house. Ed came to the conclusion that maybe he had been trying to get some closure, or just wishing maybe that he had made up with his mother before she died. But I wonder if he had also seen her in the window, you know? And then that's what stopped him in the first place. Like, it literally stopped him in his tracks. Again, this is one of those things that we'll never know, unfortunately. And also, I was wrong in that statement. Myra got out, but Myra was not a functioning human by the time she got out. You know what I mean? So a few weeks before Christmas of 1971, April and her family moved in. And there was much excitement with all the family coming over to help. Like, it ended up being more like a big party. And it was already, like, it was around Christmas time and stuff like that, you know? Ed and Marcia were open about the failed exorcism. It had been all over TV anyway. And they were over living in this place. Like, Ed got another programming job in the evenings. So he would work 7 to 5 at his regular job, then drive to his part-time job for 6 o'clock to get out at 10.
Damn.
He still did his half day on Saturdays. And in an interview, like, after the book, he actually said that he had a third job at one stage as well. I think, like, just that wasn't as consistent. You know what I mean?
So his fourth job, technically.
No, he had his regular job, his part-time job, and then there was a third job.
The one at Saturdays?
Saturdays was his regular job.
Oh.
He actually had, like, pretty much the same shift that I do.
That's rough.
Yeah, so anyway, back in the day, apparently computer programming was done on paper. So he would, like, take all of his work, all of the code would be printed out, and you would have to read through all the code and then change it to fix. Jeez. Yeah, and then I guess, like, re-plug that in. It sounded like a nightmare. Fun. And the funny thing is like, he was very unsure of his career at this time in the 70s. He was like, I think this is going to be like a dying fucking
It's like dead technology.
Yeah. He was like, computers aren't going to go anywhere. You can't replace
Yeah.
people. And he ended up becoming like basically a millionaire, I think.
And here
by
we
the
are,
sounds of it.
self-checkouts.
Either way, Ed was determined to get the fuck out of that house. And in the meantime, he assumed that Marcia would be fine because now she could just hang out with April all day.
Yeah.
Neither of them worked because they both looked after the kids full time. So he was like, oh, perfect. This is great. Ed didn't know that April had very different plans when she moved in, though.
Oh.
So Ed and Marcia had warned April like not to interact with anything. If she happened to experience anything, just don't acknowledge it, and certainly do not provoke it. Ed had actually told April about the ghost a long time before she had moved in. But like I said, this didn't dissuade her in the least. In fact, she told Ed that she had been, quote unquote, studying the paranormal for years and was only too eager to have an experience of her own.
Uh-oh.
This is going to make me sound cocky. I've been reading almost nothing but paranormal stuff for the last 4 years now.
Correct.
I still won't say that I research
Possibly
or
longer.
study. Well, yeah, like as more than just a hobby, like as
something professional.
Almost like to that extent, but I would never even say like I studied the paranormal or I researched paranormal. You know what I mean?
Well, that's
I
what
just
you
read
do.
it. It's an interest for me.
That's what researching is. Reading.
It's like
reading and learning.
And like writing papers and stuff.
You literally write on your iPad these episodes.
Yeah, but I still
You
wouldn't
are a
consider
paranormal
it.
research, Adam.
Well, I wouldn't consider myself that, whereas April did. And my point is...
You're too humble for your own good.
Okay, fair enough. But my point was that basically
I'm sure everybody else would agree with me.
She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know what she was doing. But like a typical paranormal studier...
Researcher?
She thought fuck.
See?
Yeah. Maybe I should research fucking English. No, but basically she went in thinking that she had all the answers.
Mm.
And these kind of people never do.
Mm-hmm.
Like that dude who got fired last week. My God. Guy had all the answers.
He had
got
none.
fired the next day.
Yeah.
For all the wrong answers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was only a matter of time before she started noticing that the chandelier would swing from side to side of its own accord. And if she looked at it and it was still, it would start within a few seconds of her staring at it. Now, this was the exact same thing that Ellen had happened too.
Mm.
Ellen initially kind of thought, this was the girl who just moved out. She kind of thought like, oh, isn't this a neat little trick? Every time I look at it, it starts to move. And it was only kind of after that she realized like, oh no, something is doing this to get my attention, like, or whatever.
Yeah. So funny. Like, why would you think like, oh, cool, a house that does tricks?
Yeah, I know.
What the fuck?
Leave. I don't have an exact timeline, but I think just a couple of months after moving in, April was carrying out what sounded like good old-fashioned seances.
Mm.
Ed said, quote, April soon took to having candlelit gatherings, creating a seance-type atmosphere.
Oh.
And she would invite friends over and try to communicate with whatever was inhabiting the building using a Ouija board.
Oh, weren't things like this popular during that time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it ever really went
like
out,
the
but especially back then.
spiritual
Yeah.
resurgence.
Because it was the early 70s, the hippies were kind of gone, but there was like...
Everybody was playing with the Ouija boards.
Yeah, and like...
Luigi boards.
This weird, like, I'm a conservative, but I also...
Play a game. Do you want to play a game?
Yeah. Anyway, Ed described this as a seance-type atmosphere. It was a fucking seance. There's candles lit, bunch of people hanging around trying to talk to the dead.
Yeah.
Just like Ed had gotten Ben to open the door on command, so too had April taught her ghost a few tricks. She would invite these friends of hers over, they would call out to whoever was there, and the basement door would begin to open of its own accord.
Damn.
Then the chandelier would start to swing, and finally, April's prize piano would start to play a few lonely notes. Down, 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 down.
Hell House franchise.
Yes. The song from Hell House.
If you haven't watched those movies, what are you doing? What are you doing right now that's more important than watching Hell House besides listening to our podcast?
Yeah, wait until the ads play, then go watch Hell House. Everyone except for the third one was fantastic. But Ed specifically said that 4 notes would play on this piano. So I was like, this is literally Hell House.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning again that the exorcism that had been performed had aired on TV multiple times on different shows in different states.
Reruns.
Yeah, and like it would play on one news report or whatever and do so well that they would be like, oh shit, now we have to play it at like the 9:30 one down here in whatever town. So anyone who was even slightly interested was more than happy to tag along to this fucking exorcism house in downtown Chicago, you know?
Mm-hmm.
April doesn't sound like the most...
Careful.
Yeah, you know what I mean? She would just let anyone in by the sounds of things. Not like that. Anyone into the house. And just to witness this madness.
People called her Easy Access April.
It's also worth mentioning that April had come to learn that she was not dealing with Ben. She found out that her ghost was called Henry. Henry, again, was the son who had died in that front bedroom under suspicious circumstances. It was said to be suicide, but Ed gave the impression that the impression he had been given by his neighbor Walter was that possibly somebody else had put an end to Henry and made it look like the suicide.
And Ed was very impressionable.
Very impressionable. April started going downhill, like fairly rapidly after all this business with the Ouija board. But I will admit that I don't really know what she was like before she moved in. Like, obviously, I mean, I don't know what Ed is like. Well, I have a better idea of what Ed is like. You know what I mean? But April was...
She's a wild card.
Yeah, she was. I think she was like...
Wild card.
The black sheep of the family kind of thing. Ed heard all sorts of commotion coming from downstairs one Sunday afternoon and went down to discover April commanding her husband to discipline the kids with his belt. Now, again, the 70s, I don't think this was quite uncommon, but Ed made out like that it wasn't a common occurrence in their household. And he was like taken aback that his sister was acting like this. And when Ed interrupted, April started going off on the husband right in front of him, saying like just all sorts of horrible, like demeaning shit. Like, it was only then, after this, Ed went back upstairs and Marcia was like, she hasn't been the same since the Ouija board thing.
Whoa.
And Ed was like, Ouija board? What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
Marcia had told him like weeks or months before because she had been there for one of these seances. But he was so tired because all he did was fucking work that it just went in one ear and out the other, literally. And so once he realized what was happening, he went back downstairs, grabbed the Ouija board and destroyed it. He told April to go and get...
so he already knew.
He did, but it just didn't register with him. Do you know what I mean? Like Marcia told him.
Yeah.
I think he was like half asleep when she told him. So it just never landed, like, you know what I mean?
So April's husband told Ed about the Ouija board and he was like, oh.
No, Marcia told Ed.
Yeah, but when did he throw away the Ouija board?
So basically, Ed walked in, the family was having this huge fight. The husband was about to start hitting the kids with the belt. Ed took the kids upstairs, spoke to Marcia. Marcia was like, I'm telling you, she hasn't been the same since the Ouija board thing. And Ed was like, what? What Ouija board? What are you talking about? And Marcia was like, see, I told you months and months ago about the Ouija board, but you weren't listening. And he was like, I'll get that Ouija board. Walks back downstairs, takes the Ouija board, destroys it.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm with you now.
Cool. And then April told her to get crucifixes. No, Ed told April... Ed told April to go and get crucifixes for all of the family and every room. And then a week later, she arrived. They didn't talk for the week because Ed was at work until next Sunday.
Oh.
A week later, she came to Ed to tell him that she actually thought that he was possessed because when he was going off on her the previous week and breaking up the Ouija board and whatnot, she had seen a face behind him. It's like standing over his shoulder. It was the same distorted face that Ellen, the previous tenant, had described seeing in her baby's room when she had first moved in. She was describing Henry.
The one that died with suspicious circumstances.
Yes. And will also say that I didn't name them Ben and Henry because of like last podcast on the left, because that's all I can think of now when I say Ben and Henry. That was just the pseudonyms that Ed used in the book.
If you would have said that prior, I would have just imagined these ghosts as Ben and Henry.
I still do. That's the problem. I should have renamed
And
them.
then having Henry stand behind you. I just, it's not scary. It's not scary at all.
I think it is scary. This tiny little man.
Who eats pudding for like a show.
Yeah. Living the dream, man. Literally, he is living my dream.
Good pud.
Over the next couple of months, it seemed that April was truly coming apart at the seams. She was hearing voices when she was alone in the apartment telling her to harm herself. She was feeling someone putting their hands on her shoulders, seeing full apparitions regularly, and her son had also started talking to Henry. Her son was around 5, and he was talking to, quote, Henry on a regular basis. He also threatened April that he would tell Henry anytime she punished him or threatened to punish him. Yeah. Now, I can't say whether he had picked up on Henry's name from listening to the adults talking about him or not. And I also don't know if the little lad's bedroom was that front room where Henry had died, but I'm assuming it was. Either way, the phenomena that April was so excited to experience at the beginning had now become the bane of her existence. Even though she claimed to have stopped trying to entice these spirits, it was too late. It was almost cliche. She had opened a door that she couldn't close. She couldn't even escape Henry in her dreams. She was plagued with nightmares and had become convinced that she was going to die in that apartment. Interestingly enough, her husband was in complete denial of any ghostly presence, even though his sleep was interrupted nightly by the slow, persistent piano playing. My own little theory is that if we completely indulge and say that absolutely everything here, everything that was happening was 100% paranormal, maybe it was affecting Jim, the husband, specifically in this way to increase the tension between him and April, and in turn, him and Ed. Because Ed's now he's like pleading with Jim to leave the apartment. He's like, I'll give you your security deposit back.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with how my sister is acting since she's been here, and I'm afraid for you and the kids. And Jim's just like, I don't think it's ghosts. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like, that's it. So it's almost like there's something in front of him. Like, you know what I mean? As if, what's the expression I'm looking for?
He's in denial.
Yeah, but it seems like almost unnatural denial. Like, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean,
shit is right in front of his face.
Well, imagine having to grapple with, a realization that something is actually wrong, that's out of your control. That's enough to make a person go crazy.
I mean, I guess.
We've seen this before.
I know, but I'm thinking it might be paranormal in itself.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like to cause a rift.
Yeah.
But I don't agree, because usually it's because one person doesn't see any paranormal stuff. But you just said he gets woken up by weird piano playing.
Night,
so he has seen it.
That's why I'm saying it's like something is telling him, no, you don't, like some fucking Jedi mind trick, you know what I mean? Either way, he insisted that April was just going through some sort of change.
Or it could be a human response.
Maybe. I think it's a ghost. So, while all this was going on, Ed had managed to secure a deal on a new building. It was all legal, but it was definitely a very convenient situation where the seller had friends in the bank. So it was like a very lucky find. You know what I mean? The activity hadn't really changed in the upstairs apartment other than a bit of an outburst once they had openly started talking about moving. And poor Kitty, once again, was found below the bedroom window one last time. She wasn't dead, but she did have like a tiny little scrape on her nose.
Oh.
Yeah. They had managed to find a couple who would move into their apartment and manage the property for a fair deal. On the rent, which they would mail in every month, meaning Ed and Marcia literally had no need to ever go back to this building, right?
Sick.
Yeah. They also offered for April and Jim to move out of that building and into their new building, because their new building was also an apartment building.
Mm-hmm.
But they refused.
They wanted to stay there?
They wanted to stay there. Jim, because he lived so close to work, was like, no, this place fine. Ain't no ghost.
See, motive.
I don't know. So Ed and Marcia did move out. They got this new building. It was all very good. Happy days. Marcia was delighted. But about a month after they had moved out, they got a call from Jim. April was gone.
Damn.
Yeah. She hadn't been able to sleep the night before, so she sat in the kitchen chain smoking and listening to the radio.
Oof.
And when Jim woke up, she had left, taking only her purse.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And it was like, I can't remember exactly now. I might mention it down here. It was a cold time of year in Chicago. She just walked out. Like, I don't even think she had a jacket on. To this day, April refuses to talk about what happened that night. Maybe Henry showed up while she sat alone in the morning hours, or maybe she just heard the piano play one last time and couldn't take it anymore. Either way, she left her kids and her husband, and Ed didn't see her again for years.
Fuck.
Yeah, she'd never had any real relationship with her children after this.
Wow.
Like, that was it. So that's what I'm saying. I can't blame all of this specifically on the ghost, like Ed almost does.
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of person she was to begin with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jim, April's husband, moved back in with his mother so she could watch the kids while he went to work. And within a couple of weeks, there was new tenants living downstairs. It was like an older couple. So Ray and Lynn were the caretakers that Ed had living in the upstairs apartment. And they called him one evening to ask if they could drop off the rent in person. They'd been living there 3 months at this stage. And I think Ed was just kind of waiting around for this call.
Waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah. But he agreed and they came over for coffee and cake.
That sounds fucking amazing right now.
I
Can we
know.
go have coffee and cake?
I thought you had yoga.
Oh shit. Damn it.
Well, maybe we can go for coffee and cake after this, after all.
Here we go.
So the conversation started out normally enough, but after a while, Lynn sheepishly broached the topic. Did you ever have anything unusual happen in the apartment?
Can I come in and talk to you about your car insurance?
Ed played dumb and shot Marcia a warning look, telling her a look warning her not to say anything. Ray became suddenly very interested in his shoes, clearly very embarrassed about the subject altogether.
Damn, gaslighting over here.
Yeah. So Lynn went on to say that they were hearing strange noises in the apartment. Pots and pans were moving on their own, their dishes were being smashed on the floor, and most bizarre of all, the sweeping brush would just take itself out of the closet in the middle of the kitchen.
How is that a bad problem?
I know. I think maybe old Ben was dropping hints to Lynn. Because this didn't happen to Ed and Marcia. Maybe, by the sounds of things, Ed was quite a clean freak. Mm-hmm. So maybe he was just dropping hints, being like,
Yeah.
the last one swept. I'll just leave this here.
That's funny.
The couple weren't scared necessarily. They just wanted that validation because they were worried that they were losing their minds, literally. Within a couple of weeks, though, Ed got a call from the downstairs tenant complaining about Ray and Lynn.
Oh, shit.
They were arguing constantly, and she would hear them moving furniture all night long.
Damn.
She wanted Ed to call and speak with them.
Who does that? Like, imagine us getting into an argument and then compulsively moving chairs and in the middle of arguing.
I literally had an upstairs neighbor that did that before.
So weird.
I called the police on them. After the police called in, they stood there and broke a chair against the floor.
Holy shit.
And I was like, well, what the fuck do I do now?
You're down a chair.
Yeah.
Sucks for you.
Anyway, Ed knew that his tenant was complaining about the same old arguments that him and Marcia had heard, Dave and Ellen had heard, I'm sure April and Jim had heard, and they were even hearing it when it was just them and Myra living there. He also knew that Ray was a garbage man and had to be up at crazy hours. What?
The way you said it, he's a garbage man. He's a garbage human.
No, Ray seemed like a lovely human, unlike Jim, who possibly was
I
a
think
garbage
there's
man.
a proper name. A person that works
Garbage man.
Okay, yeah.
Rubbish man. Dust man.
Yeah. And just to me, it just sounded like
John Q. Garbage man. Anyway, so he would have had, he went to bed very early.
waste management. There it is.
Waste management man.
Yeah.
A waste manager.
And then,
Very respectful job. Tons of treasure.
yeah.
The odd body or two. In fact, okay, so we keep going way off topic. Ed knew that Ray was also a garbage man, waste disposal manager, a sanitary worker,
Truck driver man.
custodian of the night. And so basically that meant that he would have been asleep when this older tenant downstairs was calling, complaining about the arguments.
Mm.
And Ed just knew that it wasn't them arguing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
A couple of weeks later, and the woman called again complaining. Then Ray called complaining that the woman was being an asshole for some reason. And so, funny enough, Ray was so nice that he would go down and take this old lady's garbage out for her.
Mhm.
Not because he was a garbage man, just because he was a good neighbor. And as the weeks progressed, she just started throwing it on the back porch. Like, not even tying the bags by the sounds of things.
Whoa.
Like, she became a real not nice person. And this headache was just too much for Ed, and he decided he was going to have to cut his losses and just sell the place.
Okay.
He got set up with an ad in the paper and a real estate agent who assured him that the place would sell in no time. But no matter how many people came to view the property, they just couldn't get rid of it.
Mm.
Now, the initial contract for selling it was for like 90 days. And the dude was like, I'm almost sure he was a Texan. He was like 6'5". I'm picturing like the Marlboro fucking cowboy, but like all cocky and shit. He's like, I've never, made it to the 90-day thing. I always sell my houses in the first couple of weeks, that kind of attitude. And yeah, nothing they did would get rid of it. Eventually, even Ray and Lynn told Ed that they needed to leave. They were like, look, we signed on for the cheap rent. And I know that we agreed to, like, they were showing the house and all for Ed. They're like, we have to fucking leave. The activity had built up to more than just slightly entertaining nuisances. And funny enough, it was these guys that went to the parish priest to arrange having the house blessed. But as soon as they gave the address, the dude was just like, nope.
Yeah.
And again, it was the same fucking priest that Ed had invited over
For
2
hot
years
dog
ago
lunch.
for hot dog buffet lunch. Yeah. So Ed was in a real bind now. He couldn't afford to cover both mortgages without any rent coming in. So he spoke with his realtor again. This realtor, like I said, was at a complete loss. He had never had this much trouble getting rid of a place in his entire career, and told Ed he just needed more time. But Ed ended up like confessing, telling him everything that had been going on with the building. And in a complete turn of events, again, the realtor said, Ed, give it to me.
Plot twist, the realtor was April.
Just takes off her cowboy hat and a big mustache. No, so it turns out this dude, now that I think of it, maybe fucking, yeah. It turns out this dude and his wife were like just our kind of people. Total ghost nerds. Ghost nerds. They were total ghost nerds. Now, he couldn't afford to actually buy it, but Ed transferred the place to him with the remaining mortgage, and basically he was able to like sell the house and only lose $1,000, which isn't like the end of the world. He almost broke even with it, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And this was a small price to pay for the freedom it gave him and Marcia, not only
Yeah.
financially, but like, ghostly as well.
Yeah. It's a big monkey ghost on their back.
Yeah. Ghost monkey. So I tried to find this realtor, but the records online seem to be kind of spotty. And I think, like I said, I think he was a Texan, so maybe it wasn't registered the same way as like a regular purchase or something like that. But according to Ed, the dude's life was totally ruined after he inherited or
Bought the house.
bought the house. Yeah. Ed tried to contact him a couple of years later, just being like purely curious to see what was going on with the house. I found out that the business was gone. The dude his wife had left him, and he had been stricken with some sort of weird illness.
Weird.
And he ended up, I think, moving back down here. So today, the building still stands. And again, I'm not going to share the address, but it's pretty easy to find if you go looking for it. It's still 2 separate apartments, and I even found a post from the last time the owner was trying to find new tenants. It was really cool to see it in a modern setting, because now we've seen like the old video of it on the news, and now you can go on and look at this ad. I don't think there's a price on it because it has been let, but it was just, you see the layout, you see it as it was then, as it is now. And the funniest thing was that in all caps, towards the end of the ad, is no pets allowed.
Because they will run away.
They will run away or get thrown away. Yeah, so like I would give anything to try and get some stories from some of the tenants. Like it's been 50 years since Ed moved out. More, 51 years since Ed moved out. So like I'm sure a lot of people have rented it. It's been like bought, let go derelict almost, and then bought again and then rented out again. So like it's been constantly being sold and bought and rented out and all that. So like a lot of these kinds of stories, like we see the activity just fizzle out over time. So I wouldn't be totally surprised to find like that there's people just living a completely normal life there now. But I'd love to just know more about it, basically. So yeah, if we have any active Chicago listeners, it's the Campbell Street haunting. You can find it. You've probably driven past it like many times.
Something tells
Let
me
us
it
know.
hasn't fizzled out.
I don't think so. Like, honestly, because
if we were to believe the medium, they're ghosts that belong there.
yeah.
They're of that place. They're not passing through.
And that, like, and something that I left out was like, Ed kind of found a way to get them to stop. He had trouble. There was gas pipes in the attic, which are really difficult to get to, and something kept turning them off. So they would wake up in the morning and have no heating and stuff like that. And then Ed started to think like, well, if they can turn it off, maybe they can turn it back on, and then we'll just have a gas leak into the apartment. You know what I mean? So when he had bought the new place and they were about to move out, he started shouting and ranting, like saying, fuck it, like I'm just going to burn this place to the ground. Like, it makes no difference to me. It's insured. I'm going to leave anyway. How are you going to like it then? And then like the activity would stop. So it did almost kind of seem like it was
Intelligent
and like, yeah, like you were saying, like this is their space. The family built it, lived in it, were abused in it, and died in it.
You know, me and Manelli were talking theories like we normally do.
Yeah.
And she was telling me about when a soul transcends after death, how it has to go through trials. If you don't find your light body during this lifetime, you have to repeat it all over in your next lifetime. And I was saying, she was talking to me about this guy who meditated, and he said that usually, he's like, when he was meditating, he saw a tunnel of light. And, usually when people pass away, that's what they see. Yeah. And he says, don't get fooled by the tunnel of light. You actually have to go up, not towards the tunnel of light.
Weird.
He's like, and when you go up, because if you go towards the light, you're just reborn.
Oh, okay.
And if you go up, you're actively trying to get, like, because there's veils. So there's veils. And in this meditation, he was able to climb himself up these veils and go up to what one would describe as heaven. And he said that he saw God in his meditation. So this guy he was in jail. He was in solitary confinement for years, where all he had time for was to meditate.
Jesus Christ.
So basically he was in like a sensory deprivation tank of his own. And anyways, he said he saw God. And when he saw God, he said it looked like what pictures are of God and the devil. So like it just kept flicking. It was like a moving picture.
Weird.
In a figure. And I was like, wow, that's fucking wild, I was like, okay, if we believe that that's true, let's follow that.
Yeah.
Because I also believe that as souls, we do evolve.
As souls.
Yeah, we evolve. And I do believe in reincarnation, but I think it depends. Like, we do get reborn as humans, right? Oh, I should also mention, before he found out about going up instead of through the light, he actually did go through the light once through his meditation. And he just found himself, like, abruptly taken out of meditation.
Oh, like he just re-entered himself.
Right, exactly. So I was like, well, if people that die go through that light, it makes sense that is the passage of reincarnation.
Yeah.
and he was able to get torn back out of meditation because he still had a living body.
Yeah.
Whereas if you die, you don't have anything to go back to, but doesn't mean you don't come back. So the souls that are still here are probably ghosts that are recently deceased. Until they can learn and evolve. And then once they evolve just enough to know that they can travel to different planes of existence in different times and different spaces, then they stay here on the earth realm as ghosts.
Yeah.
And once they learn that they can move, once they evolve and they can move around, they can go wherever they want. Mm-hmm. So technically, if a person this house could be initially haunted by ghosts that are recently deceased, and if they were able to evolve, then they'd come back because this is their home. So whether they're whether they're evolved or not, it's like they're in this house either by choice,
yeah,
or by force.
That is interesting. And it makes sense to me specifically for this case where like the two brothers who sounded like they were just horrible people.
Yeah.
We know for sure that the older one, Ben, was. And if they're that type of person, they probably don't want to change.
Mm-hmm.
They're like that type of stubborn prick who's just like,
yeah, it could be.
I'll do what I want.
Yeah.
This is their house. This is their domain.
Right.
Whereas the mother, as far as we know, did go on because that last time that Ed saw her was the last time that he saw her. You know what I mean? When she like was looking at her son, maybe they did get some weird kind of closure that day. Mm-hmm. And she was able to go on, or maybe she was just like, fuck it, I'm tired. I'm out of here.
Yeah, potentially. And it also makes me think of like, you know, when pets or animals, they recently pass, they sort of linger to say a goodbye before they go wherever. Or maybe they're just too weak to be present, like to manifest in a way to show people signs.
So like that's when you start to hear like the claws on the tile floor.
Or like a music box that starts playing after it's been broken. Mm-hmm. Or like those kinds of things after someone's recently deceased. But then they kind of disappear for a while. Like those signs aren't there anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you need them the most, or when something shitty goes down, or some momentous occasion happens, people do report saying like, I know my loved one came back. Yeah. You know? And so that would explain that, like that huge gap of time between when they recently died and shown their presence, and when they reappeared when they were most needed.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? But of course, like this is just a theory.
But I mean, like, that would also explain why our bedroom lights came on a couple of weeks ago in the middle of the night.
Oh yeah, that was fucking weird.
Independent lights that have their own switches that aren't connected to the internet at the minute because it's not working.
Yeah, we haven't been able to figure that out. We haven't been able to turn them on like Bluetooth wise, but so we have to turn them on manually.
It was weird. But yeah, I get what you mean. Like shortly after a loved one dies, there tends to be this like a few weird occasions or whatever
that one could only explain or designate to the recent passing of a loved one.
And then there does kind of seem to be radio silence for a while.
Yeah.
Which is what you're going to get from us for the next few months.
Nice segue.
Yeah, so we might have one listener episode to do sometime in the near future, but I don't want to say this is going to come out in 2 weeks' time because obviously that hasn't been working this year. So yeah, I will be cancelling the Patreon as well during this time. I know a lot of our Patreon members were like, we don't care, we just wanted to support. That's all well and good, but like if I'm not producing anything,
there's not really nothing to support.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So while I appreciate that and all, I'm going to look into just suspending it for a while because there is still a lot of stuff on there that people can check out, that kind of thing. In the meantime, follow our Instagram, weeklycreep at instagram.com. Check out our YouTube. If you want more content, there is like always a little couple of extra bonus stuff on there. And
Oh, on a side note, like if you're missing us, we have our own vlog channel. We haven't posted on the vlog channel in a long time, but me and Adam, we find great enjoyment in looking at our old videos because I remember when we first started doing vlogs, it was mostly for his grandparents to see them.
Yeah.
And we're rewatching them and oh my God, they're just so I know there's probably some people that can't stand watching themselves, but I think
No,
they're
what-
so funny.
Yeah, it's nice as well because it's just like home videos.
Yeah, we're just
think so.
reliving memories.
Yeah.
So if you miss us, check out Adam and Dulce on YouTube.
Yeah, Adam and Dulce, Weekly Creep everywhere else. Yeah, that's all. See you guys whenever.
See you guys.